San Jose State continues to be the doorway to the heart of global innovation. What we learn together now will benefit our community when we welcome everyone back to campus. SJSU, Silicon Valley's public university.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm here speaking right now on behalf of President Papazian, who was unable to attend today. And we've got a lot of questions, all kinds of things happening, and we want to really jump into the updates. So I just want to begin with the welcome and move to our land acknowledgement as an important part of all our public meetings. In recognizing the land acknowledgement, I would like to read the following. While we gather at San Jose State University, we are gathered on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Papazian Ohlone, who were the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muekwe Ohlone tribe and who were missionized into missions Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores. The lands on which San Jose State University is established was and continues to be of significance to the Muekwe Ohlone tribe. We also recognize that the ancestors of the Muekwe Ohlone constructed and maintained the 3 Bay Area missions. Our campus extends to surrounding areas that held a tupantak, a traditional roundhouse, which were once located at the historic Lope Yingos land grant Rancho Poslomi, Posistas de la Animas, Little Wells of Souls, and also Marcelo, Pio, and Cristobal's land grant Rancho Ulistac, which were places of celebration and religious ceremonies, as well as nearby ancestral heritage shell mounds that served as the tribe's traditional cemetery sites and territorial monuments. San Jose State University also desires to honor the military service of the Muekwe who have honorably served overseas during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, and who are still serving in the United States Armed Forces today. So as introduction quickly here, I want to just begin by thanking everyone on behalf of the president and the university, all the faculty and staff who've worked incredibly hard over the past 14 months to really deal with what is a very unique phenomenon, which was the COVID pandemic. I also have to recognize the resiliency of our students, and it's really important to acknowledge that they have done incredible work in maintaining their movement forward, even in a time of such crisis. So over the next hour or so, we're going to highlight a number of key aspects of the plan for the fall. We're going to focus on some of the latest guidance and policy changes, and doing so while recognizing that the global pandemic is still alive and well, and that various people around the world are sheltered in place and are facing, both here and abroad, economic distress and disparities as a result of this pandemic. I also want to just acknowledge that the staff members who have worked really hard on the ADAPT plan this past year, and we need to acknowledge as well all the unique individuals with different personal approaches, and we have to treat everyone within the context of this pandemic with respect. This is really critical because it's a focus of who we are as a campus, and contextualizing and making sure we understand everyone is dealing with this pandemic in their own way. I would be remiss if I didn't encourage everyone to get vaccinated if they have not done so. There is no doubt, and the data bear this out, that getting vaccinated is the best thing we can do to keep ourselves and our community safe and from preventing the spread with family, friends, coworkers, and neighbors. So I want to acknowledge a couple of things real quickly and just highlight what I think are going to be some of the big picture questions moving forward here. So our approach to the fall semester is going to be treated as a transition period back to quote unquote normalcy. or what we were like in fall 2019. We have CDC and state public health guidelines. They continue to change, and we need to be aware of that. And we have to maintain our flexibility in relation to those changes. At the same time, we have to make sure we prioritize our physical health, our mental health, and our safety. And so that, the information, and people have to understand that we have information we're required to gather by the chancellor's office as we help outline specific guidelines and so forth, particularly, for example, around housing, around the return to classrooms, around large scale events, and so forth. We know that while the fall is a transition, one of the things I do want to highlight early on is that the schedule will stay as it really is built now. We're not going to make radical changes to the fall schedule because people have already made plans, both those who work as well as students who are enrolled. While we do that, we're going to acknowledge and really push forward that the spring schedule planning will return somewhat normal. Within all of this and the transition, it's important to note there's going to be a lot of questions about the mask wearing, about vaccination policies, what's going to happen with physical distancing, what we need to do in what reopening really looks like, and some of the other spaces that we share. I know people put a lot of kind of thinking behind, like, what is it going to really be to be on campus? I want to point out a couple of big key policy changes that will be discussed today. As of July 1st, fully vaccinated individuals do not need to wear a mask while on campus unless they desire to continue to wear one. Unvaccinated individuals must continue to wear masks indoors. Very importantly, though, and this is critical, even as the guidance changes, we have to treat and respect everyone's decisions whether to wear a mask. So there may be people who are vaccinated who choose to wear masks. It's very important that we maintain a respect for those people. For those who are not yet vaccinated or cannot get vaccinated for any variety of reasons, they will continue to wear masks, and we have to respect that and acknowledge that important difference in our community. At the same time, as policies are changing around masks and other things, certain protocols are going to remain into effect, so we can do our best to minimize the transition and adapt to various the state of vaccination and so forth in our region. Fortunately, at least in Santa Clara County, we've seen very high rates of uptake of vaccination. University personnel, FD&O, and environmental health and safety are going to continue to work with our high-risk departments to discuss protocols for the fall semester and beyond. So as part of today, I just want to acknowledge that we're going to highlight our approach for teaching and learning for the fall. We're going to talk about the process for safely returning people, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can. I have to acknowledge and thank those who submitted questions in advance. Note that we'll be doing our best to answer as many questions as possible, prioritizing those that affect most, if not all, of our campus community. And I want to acknowledge that we have faculty, staff, administrators, and students at this event today. We have got to continue to emphasize the safety and health of our entire campus community and acknowledge the role of this SJSU Adapt plan in relation to that. So just to remind everyone that recordings will be posted and accessible on the SJSU Adapt website, as well as a couple of housekeeping items. If you're going to submit a question, you can use the Q&A session and click on that at the bottom of the toolbar. Also, we are, as I mentioned, recording the session, so please note that that is the case for us. So real brief, I want to just turn to a high-level discussion of teaching and learning before turning it over to Dr. Barbara Fu, who's going to talk a little bit about where we are. As I mentioned earlier, and I can't state enough, fall will be a transition semester. We have almost 50% of our classes are scheduled to be face-to-face in the fall, and students and faculty and staff need to be prepared for that. Another 20 or 30% are hybrid, and the rest are fully online. Many of our students will have a mixed schedule in the fall of online and face-to-face and hybrid classes. So everybody needs to be preparing and thinking about that. We don't have any large lecture classes right now scheduled. We've maintained, 50 and under for these classes. Importantly, though, as recognition, it's June. Unless something dramatic happens and let's say the pandemic reemerges in a way that forces us to shift, we are not going to change the schedule. So students who have filled out the schedule and have their classes should understand that that's the schedule they're going to have. Faculty for the same thing. And as I mentioned, we will continue to look at the spring and think about what it will look like for our longer term approach to delivering a high quality, accessible, and flexible degrees to our students. So with that, now I'd like to turn over to Dr. Barbara Fu, who's going to talk a little bit about vaccination and some of the other issues that we'll be dealing with from a health perspective on the campus.
Thank you, Vin. We are all looking forward to repopulation at San Jose State and new opportunities for in-person engagement. A key part of repopulation and keeping our communities safe and healthy includes COVID-19 vaccines. The Chancellor's Office has announced the intent for a COVID-19 vaccine policy, which will require faculty, staff, and students to receive a COVID-19 vaccine to access campus facilities, and would take effect upon the beginning of the fall 2021 term or upon full FDA approval of a COVID-19 vaccine, whichever is later. For those who are trying to prepare for fall semester, it is recommended to try to complete and get the last dose of the COVID-19 vaccine by August 6th in order to be fully vaccinated. And again, the intent of this policy is to encourage COVID-19 vaccinations. The COVID-19 vaccines in the US have gone through preclinical and clinical trials in tens of thousands of persons to test their safety and effectiveness. And as of today, June 24th, there have been over 300 million doses of the vaccines given in our country. These vaccines play an important role for us to be able to protect ourselves, our families, and our campus community. So even though SJSU is still awaiting the final CSU COVID-19 policy, the university anticipates that there will be a process for faculty, staff, and students to indicate their COVID-19 vaccine completion, or a medical exemption or religious exemption, or to indicate whether they plan to access campus facilities. There also could be a verification process too. More details will be released once the CSU policy has been finalized. Until there is an official policy from the CSU Chancellor's Office, there are no concrete policy decisions yet. Also regarding vaccines, the CDC states that a person is considered fully vaccinated if they have completed an approved COVID-19 vaccine and it has been 2 weeks or more since their last dose. In California, as of today, June 24th, those who are not vaccinated will need to mask when they are in an indoor public space, quarantine if they have been a close contact, and quarantine and get testing after travel. Besides vaccines, similar to last semester, COVID-19 testing will be planned for certain groups who have a higher chance for spread. Also, anyone who has symptoms of COVID-19 should isolate themselves right away and not come to campus, and should get testing. You can contact healthcare providers for testing, or students can also call the Student Wellness Center. So for anyone who has not been vaccinated, there are many ways to get the COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccination is free and is not based on residency or immigration status. In California, to find a vaccine site near you, you can go to the website myturn.ca.gov. In Santa Clara County, you can also go to the website sccfreevax.org. And the university has been working with the county and other partners to be able to provide pop-up clinics on site. So continue to watch for these opportunities. The Student Wellness Center is also working to be able to administer COVID-19 vaccines and will provide an update once this is available. And now I'd like to introduce Lisa Malora, Vice President for Strategy and Chief of Staff, who will use the remaining time to moderate questions and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Fu. As a reminder, you're welcome to ask questions through the Q&A button on your toolbar. And as Vin mentioned earlier, we received a large number of questions through the registration process, and we'll do our best to answer all of them during this session. We will post those responses along with answers to questions that we may not get to before the town hall concludes on our Health Advisory's website. We will do our best. I'm sorry, can I be heard? I just got a message saying that my mute button was on. So
you're coming in loud and clear.
Thank you.
Perfectly fine.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. This is the Zoom world. Let me first turn to Joanne Wright, our Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel, to help address some of our questions. In her role, Joanne oversees what many of us think of as human resources, employee programs, and employee relations. Joanne, first, let me ask a very basic question. What is the effective return to campus date for office staff?
August 2nd is the planned return date for the fall schedule, that kind of gradual transitioning back to, our normal life, right, on campus, with the buildup starting in July, to start gradually coming in July to get to that normal schedule in August.
Great. How are decisions being made about what employees need to come to campus as we begin to repopulate the campus?
So each area is going through their staffing list and making determinations about how much people should be coming to campus, what's needed, the times, the days. When we started this process back in March, we were a very different place than where we are now on June 24th. So people have been putting together schedules, and we have been reviewing them, every single one, and asking questions and making sure, we started out really, looking at density and just making sure that people were balanced in that way. So there were different considerations taken into account. A lot of it has to do too with, I just want to mention, rebuilding our campus community. And so having people coming back to start that rebuild. So we're seeing a lot of people coming to campus maybe twice a week, that type of thing.
I think that embedded in some of the questions we've received is about what employees might be able to do or what options there might be for those who wish to continue working remotely if there is no operational need for them to be on campus.
So I know sometimes employees think maybe there's no need for me to be on campus. And I guess I just want to go back to it, because I always go back to this and started with this. The mission of San Jose State is to educate our students and to enrich the lives of our students. And, we have a vibrant campus community. We remember that, right, from a year and a half ago. And right now, we are working to rebuild that community. And I want to stress the importance of each and every member of the campus community. I mean, I think there are those who might think like, oh, I'm kind of back office and I'm not really part of, the people who are face-to-face or, really like every day talking to students. At University Personnel, we don't really have student interactions, but we're my staff, I think, is very important to the university and to be here on campus. And so I just wanted to emphasize that for people as well. But to address further, we are going through this period of we know what happened this past year and a half. A lot of telecommuting was happening, mostly telecommuting. So as we go into the next phase, we want to, rebuild our community, see where we are. And then we're going to be talking about like how we move forward, with telecommuting, with hybrid schedules, that type of thing. It's definitely on the table. So just wanted to, add that too.
Actually, maybe I could follow up on that with a question that came in through registration. What is the future of telework? Is there a possibility of permanent hybrid? Has the university negotiated any new telework policies with the unions?
So we actually have a telecommuting policy that's been in place since about 2008. At that time, they were making confers with the unions. We have that telecommuting policy, which has been used, a little bit, not on a mass scale. We've been using a temporary telecommuting policy to address the concerns of COVID. But so I would say for the future, we will look at what, operational needs that we have as we move into this new phase of our new life that we've, went into again a year and a half ago. And so we'll think about that and talk about that. We understand that there are, and we see it, we've experienced it, the possibilities that might come with a hybrid schedule, with people, having less of a commute, during the week, that type of thing. We're going to look at that, and it's definitely on the table, and we're going to discuss it. But right now we're focused on, rebuilding the campus community and getting back to some kind of normalcy.
Great, thank you. Here's a slightly different take on that same theme. What if some staff members have relocated and cannot go back in person for the fall?
So, there are personal choices that people make, at any given time. So, but our concern as a campus is what is needed again for our mission, which enrich the lives of our students and educate our students and rebuild our campus community. So if somebody is in a position that would need to come back to campus, then that would be the expectation. There might be people who might need to make a personal choice if they've decided to move to a location where they can't easily commute. They might need to make that personal choice of whether they want to continue at San Jose State or maybe do something else. But that is a personal choice.
Okay. Last question before I ask Dr. Fu to rejoin us. Now that we are in phase 4, do we need to submit the return to campus form for approval to work on campus?
No, as of July, that will be off the table. So I think the individual units and departments will manage that. And that, again, we go back to that ramping up, moving into the August schedule, the fall schedule. So in July, I anticipate that people come in, maybe 1 day a week as they build up to maybe 2 or 3 days a week, whatever the schedule has been assigned to them. So yes, we're not asking for that anymore.
Great, thank you. Please stay with me. And Dr. Fu, if you could rejoin us, I have a number of questions that came in during registration about vaccinations. So perhaps both of you can speak to this. What can you share about the data collected by SJSU about vaccination status?
So I could speak to that a little bit as far as staff, non-student population. We were required to collect ascertain vaccination status by Santa Clara County. So I could just give you kind of a broad view of that. Of about 7,000, we sent about 7,000 emails requests to complete the form that we were required to have. We had over half of that, responses to that, maybe 4,000, and a great majority were fully vaccinated or on their way to being vaccinated. I'd say 97, 98% of the people who responded.
Do you happen to know in that 7,000, what is the breakdown? That doesn't just include employees, I believe.
That includes volunteers, auxiliary employees, interns, whatever kind of working type of person would be on campus, whether they're, it's an employer or volunteer.
Great. Dr. Fu, do you have any information about the student population that can be shared?
We haven't collected, student vaccination, COVID vaccination data yet, but do anticipate, if the CSU Chancellor's Office policy comes out, that we'll be collecting it then.
Great, thank you. I know that's been on everyone's minds. Next question, will unvaccinated individuals be allowed on campus?
I can take that one. Mm-hmm. The CSU again has announced the intended policy that would require faculty, staff, and students to be vaccinated to access campus facilities. But they also did announce that there could be religious and medical exemptions, and understandably, there may be individual circumstances. So it's anticipated that the university will be able to provide other safety measures such as masking, distancing, or testing in these cases once they've been reviewed.
Great, thank you. I might ask Joanne to speak more specifically to timing. So I know a question came in that was specific to when staff need to be vaccinated. Are staff required to be vaccinated by the fall? And will employees be required to show proof of immunization?
Okay, so again, the policy is not in effect yet until I think, Dr. Fu mentioned earlier, until the later of the start of the fall semester or the approval of, vaccination by the FDA. So whatever the later date is, so that policy is not going to go into effect until then. In the meantime, the Chancellor's Office, CSU system-wide, is speaking to the unions or union partners, establishing a system for how information would be collected, whether self-attestation or documentation. So for now, we definitely are strongly encouraging everyone to be vaccinated, if able to do so, in anticipation of this policy being put into effect. Again, but that later are those two dates or those two events. So definitely encouraging it.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Fu, a couple of questions specific to students. If I receive the AZ vaccination, can I enter the campus for classes?
Well, again, this will depend on the final CSU policy, but the AstraZeneca vaccine is an approved WHO EUL vaccine, which should be accepted or has been indicated by the CDC that it's within, their public health guidelines. So it's expected that this vaccine would meet the CSU policy requirements.
Great. And then I think you started to allude to this. What is the university's policy with respect to World Health Organization approved vaccines for students who are international students?
Yeah, so again, we are going to have to wait for the final CSU policy in some ways, but likely SJSU can decide to accept these vaccinations. And as I mentioned earlier, again, the CDC does include the WHO vaccines as approved to be within their guidelines.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Fu, I'm going to ask you to stick around just for a moment. And Joanne, thank you for all of your responses. I'm going to ask our provost to join us as well, Ben Del Casino, and have him join us. I know that a question that has been coming up in different circles on campus is about how we support international students as they return. Dr. Fu, and perhaps Vin, you can join her. What can you tell us about international students and quarantining as they arrive before they start their in-person classes?
Yes, well, I think right now the CDC guidance is if you haven't been vaccinated, when you travel to the US, you need to get testing and have a negative test. And then once you arrive to the US, you would need to quarantine for 7 days and then get a test within 3 to 5 days. And if it's negative, you could be out of quarantine. If you don't get tested, you would need to self-quarantine for 10 days.
Terrific, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Fu. Then maybe before I get to your first question, is there anything that you can share about discussions that we're having to make sure that we get good communication out to international students?
Yes, thank you for that. We were having a lot of conversation because our students coming from abroad need to make sure that they can get here. And some of them are going to have visa issues that push right up into the window to the start of the semester. So we're working on several strategies. One for our students who are in on-campus housing, trying to figure out how to best provide some quarantine space for them. We're having a lot of conversation right now about getting people access to vaccinations as quickly as possible, knowing that people can come to campus, as they transition through their vaccines, but maybe not in housing. So we're working on that, and we're hoping to have some direct communications. I know we have some international students on this Zoom today, and I just want you to know that we're doing a lot of work to make sure that we provide you with the best landing, including we're going to end up having to talk to faculty about some students who may have to quarantine for the first week of classes or so and may need some help just in an accommodation as they transition back to the United States. So we're going to work on all of that and make sure our students get some clear communication from us. As you can tell, that we're not just so you know, we're not ignoring the issue. And a lot of it is dependent on some of the things we're hearing from the system and so forth. But we're definitely working on a lot of strategies, and a lot of people on this campus are really, we're all committed to making sure we land people the best we can.
Great, thank you. So I know you said this, but we'll be posting information on the Health Advisory's website, right? And then from International Student Services and iHouse, any web pages that we have, we'll make sure that we link those up. And so wherever an international student looks for information on our web, we will make sure that you're all ending up in the same place. And don't hesitate to reach out with questions. You can email covidrepopulation@sjsu.edu, and we'll be sure to make sure we get you good answers. So on to some questions that came in through registration and through the chat then. How many students are projected to be on campus for fall?
On any given day, I think we are, considering maybe, 10 to 12,000, could be on campus, which is not obviously our entire student body. It might be a little less than that, depending on how the classes are spread out. But as I mentioned at the top of this broadcast, about 50, just a little under 50% of our classes are face-to-face, right? Fully face-to-face. And then hybrid, they'll be bouncing back and forth.
Great. Now, I know this is a concern for many students. If we are vaccinated but unable to attend in-person classes due to ongoing medical issues, what are the alternatives?
Well, fortunately, there is going to be a very large catalog of fully online classes in the fall. So students should be looking at the schedule and noting which classes are there for them. A number of majors have tried to focus on what we might call a parallel pathway for this fall, so that students might be able to navigate their major courses. There may be a few challenges with some face-to-face, and you need to be talking to your advisors and so forth about how to best navigate that schedule.
So on that topic, is this hybrid style going to be the new normal for SJSU? Will there be more online course options in the future?
I think we have to really talk to our students and understand where they want to be long-term. The initial data suggests that students really want a diversity of teaching learning options vis-a-vis online, hybrid, and face-to-face. And so we've always had all three on the campus, perhaps not as significant a number as we do now. But I think we're going to be looking and assessing that. And I suspect that we will definitely have more online classes on the main campus, more hybrid classes longer term as we move forward. That's got to be driven though by pedagogy and how faculty think the best way for students to learn. So there's not going to be a mandate per se, but we definitely want to look at as many options as possible and provide students pathways through our degree programs.
Great, thank you. The next question I think is grounded in, the unanswered questions about strains, variants of the coronavirus. So if new concerns were to emerge about the safety and well-being for the community, what would be the process for changing the mode of instruction once the semester has started?
Well, if we have a reemergence of the pandemic and all of a sudden find ourselves back in a category of yellow or orange or red or purple, that's a campus-wide issue, right? And so we would respond accordingly as we have in the past. So that's really the first issue. We are going to be developing outbreak management strategies, just like with other sorts of infectious diseases that circulate amongst college-age populations. We have to have a strategy for that, and that could impact potentially the delivery of some classes for part of the semester and so forth. It really depends on how an outbreak occurs and where. But we're not likely to be flipping courses back and forth, to respond to one-off cases or something like that, right?
So also, it's like you're setting me up for these questions, and that sort of leads us into another question that came in. Will faculty ever be required to teach a face-to-face class and online at the same time?
We have no plans to do what many people call high flex. That is a a faculty's decision of how to deliver courses to students. There are some real advantages to that strategy, but it's not a campus policy or strategy in that regard. There is one little caveat I just want to throw out there with our international students who might be in quarantine in, let's say, the first week of classes. We might be asking faculty to perhaps add a Zoom link into a class for the first week so that international students who cannot be on campus are able to access a course. But outside of that, we're not making any wholesale requirements, right, that classes be taught that way. Faculty may evolve towards some of those strategies and find them advantageous for their teaching. We do want to support them if that's where they want to go.
Great, thank you. What can you tell us about how lab courses will be delivered in the fall?
So what we have from state guidelines at this point is we can go back to fully enrolled classes in classrooms, including labs. I think we'll have some guidelines of strategies for taking breaks and things like that. But the practice right now is that those labs will be taught as they were in the past prior to the pandemic.
Now, I think this might be on some folks' mind. It's a really important question. Are we allowed to ask if students have received vaccinations?
Like every accommodation or any category, you are never allowed to ask that question. Now, we're working on policies and practices to make sure that students who may not be vaccinated are aware of their responsibilities to our community. And we will be working on making sure that those practices are enforced for our students.
Great. Now, here's a question that I don't know if the academic leadership has been able to consider yet. For student practica that take place offsite, will students have to pay for their own PPE or will the university provide it?
Well, at this point, as masks are no longer required, right, what PPE would we need? So the short answer is no. Now, if someone asks for material like that, then we should still have access to it. So I don't mean to be cagey. I suggest that I believe our strategy will be to still have access to PPE on the campus, and then faculty and students will be able to request that PPE if they need it.
Right, absolutely. And when Tracy comes on later, Tracy Fertilage, I think that she can provide some more detail about what we'll provide, because we will certainly provide it. Just to make clear, I don't think you're being cagey, Ben. We will provide it. But I think maybe the differentiation is that we won't require that students take it with them.
That is correct. There won't, as long as they're vaccinated. That is correct.
Great, thank you. One last question for you. What can you tell us about where students can congregate and study between classes?
So we're working on a lot of strategies right now. The library is going to be reopened, which is very exciting. And those 8 stories are going to be available. The student union is going to be open. But we're also looking at a strategy, because we're not utilizing all our classrooms as much as we have in the past because of hybrid and online. So we're looking at creating some type of system so students can know, oh, there's these open classrooms available where I can go to study or sit in on an online class or something like that. So there will be more information to come, but we definitely know we have to acknowledge. The last thing I'll say, and I don't know if this is in our overall thing or not, but we are updating our IT infrastructure. And for example, Wi-Fi will be more readily available in the lovely outdoor spaces of Northern California, where many people can often sit outside should they choose to do so as well, while they're trying to access materials and do things for classes.
Great, thank you so much, Vin. You are free to go, and I would like to welcome Tracy Fertilage, our Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operations, to join us. Many of you may already know this, but for those of you who don't, Tracy spearheaded several of the physical changes to campus during the pandemic to keep us safe. So Tracy, picking up on a question that I just asked of Vin about PPE, Can you tell me where can our campus community members obtain PPE and what sort of PPE are available?
Certainly, and hi, Lisa, and hi, everybody. So we'll continue to provide PPE. We intend to still have some of the stations that we have out on campus out there. And those stations include some hand sanitizer, gloves, as well as disposable masks. And our team, our custodial team during the day is responsible for keeping those stations stocked. We'll be repositioning them a bit so that we make sure that building entrances are covered and such, because we really want people to get access to their PPE upon entry. In addition to that, and I hope that we can put maybe the link to the location on the SJSU Adapt site, but we have a process by which individuals can request a personal kit of PPE, and all that folks need to do is go to that link and fill out the request, and then we will make sure that a personal kit gets delivered to you. And we certainly will fill those orders as quickly as we can.
Great, thank you. I have a series of questions for you that are not all very closely connected. So for those of you who are with us today, just know that, again, we're trying to make sure that we give all the questions to each panelist that are relevant to their area of responsibility. And so these won't exactly follow each other logically. So Tracy, next question. Will students who are enrolled only in online classes have access to buildings? They may need to come in to check out equipment, access materials, et cetera.
So that's an excellent question. And there will be a shift. This past year, we moved to a campus that had the exterior doors locked, and we started enabling everybody's tower card to be the way that you enter buildings around campus. We're going to continue to keep that in place. That is certainly our plan. But this past year, we only enabled access for students who had an in-person class component, right? As we move toward the fall and a greater reopening and a lot more folks being on campus, we recognize that the model that we have is changing drastically, and that means we need to provide access to more resources for our students, whether they're taking classes here on campus or taking classes online. So every student's access card will be enabled to allow them access to the campus.
Great, thank you. Next, very different question. Will there be spacing and accommodations for meetings in the fall like there are for classes?
Yeah, so, this is an interesting question. It's a good question. And I understand, we've gone through a year where there've been so many different messages about what's safe and how to go about having meetings. We'll, of course, continue to encourage, where it's possible, meetings to occur in either a full electronic or a hybrid format. But we do also recognize that, there's been elements that are missing when we don't have certain types of meetings or activities take place on campus. The changes in restrictions that we've previously had on physical distancing and capacity or density limitations has drastically changed what we can or can't do on campus. And what that means for the fall is that as you look at the California, the Beyond the Blueprint, which is the guidance from the California Department of Public Health, and you look at the local guidance as well as other requirements around capacity, because that's all been removed, we can plan to have those meetings in the spaces that we've normally had them. Of course, I think we also live in a world where we're trying to work with people, and that means that each individual department understands its group or its folks better and can come up with the meeting structure that best works for them.
Great. I think the next question dovetails with this. So in light of all of these changes, I think the question about whether our air circulation is proper is a little bit different than when this question has come up in past town halls. So what can you tell us about air circulation?
Yeah, of course. What I can tell you is the campus took all the right steps very early on during COVID, and we've not pulled back from any of those steps. So we have gone out and ensured that in locations where we have outside air dampers and full HVAC systems, we are maximizing the amount of outside airflow. We've also upgraded our filters and have added secondary filtration up to the MERV 13 level for buildings and our HVAC systems. That's what we did as we went through this past year. All of those measures are still in place. But we're also taking another look at it with a member of the CSU Mechanical Review Board. And they're actually currently working with us to reassess all the actions that we took and talk to us about what else we can do. In addition to that, we recognize that we have some spaces that perhaps don't have circulation as robust as other spaces, and or we have maybe no outside no windows or other things. We're taking a look at those spaces across the campus, and we're developing a criteria where other types of filtration may be beneficial to the environment. Of course, for those that have additional concerns even beyond hearing about those steps, remember that vaccination is one of the best ways that we can protect ourselves from COVID, and also wearing a mask is very useful and proven to be very effective.
Thank you. I am looking at the time. We have just a little over 20 minutes left, so I'm going to start to pick up the pace a little.
Sure.
Tracy, when will the MLK Library be open? And what, maybe you can also speak to a question that came in about what is the plan for keeping library employees safe?
So we we are moving toward the library reopening in August, definitely by the time school starts. We're currently still working with the library as well as SJPL, the San Jose Public Library, about exactly what that plan looks like and how we will work to ensure that we have all the proper safety protocols in place to create as healthy and safe as an environment as possible.
Great. And a little bit about SRAC. Is there any news to share about SRAC's capacity after July 1st?
Yeah, I've been in communication with the folks at SRAC. They're looking forward to getting programs opened up that they haven't been able to have. We're looking they'll be announcing some plans, but they're looking at slowly ramping up. And I anticipate by the time school starts that we'll be pretty close to normal in terms of the programs and activities that they offer.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions about guests and volunteers, and want to acknowledge to those who are attending today that there are a few more questions in Tracy's area, but I want to make sure we touch on some other parts of campus. So Joanne, if you could join us for the next set of questions, that would be helpful. So Tracy, first for you, what will be the guidance for guests on campus? And with staff and students being required to be vaccinated or potentially being required to be vaccinated, what will our stance or policy be regarding guests?
So we currently, as we know, we don't have visitors allowed on campus. As we move toward fall, the signs around visitors will come down and will more fully reopen. So that means guests and other folks will be allowed on campus. Of course, we will also develop some communications and other documents around how to behave or steps that you can take to keep yourself safe while on campus, and communicate to people what our campus requirements are concerning COVID and its safety and being safe.
Great. And then Joanne, are volunteers permitted on campus during the summer?
We are getting requests for volunteers, and we are reviewing those requests as they come in. And I would say, yes, we can, allow volunteers, for different programs that might need them.
Great, terrific. Thank you both. I'm now going to ask Patrick Day, our Vice President for Student Affairs, to join me. Patrick, I have a number of different questions about housing to lead off with, beginning with what will the residence hall capacity be?
Sure, it's the right question, and I will tell you, we're headed back towards 100%. Our students right now have decided that they want to be back in the residence halls, and so we're doing everything we can to accommodate them. We will either be full or close to full in the fall semester, And so it's actually quite an exciting time. We're excited about students being back. And I want to acknowledge the staff over there. And I want to remind everybody that we've never closed. So we've always had students in our residence halls, and the staff has done a super job, and the students have done a super job of making sure that we have a safe campus. And we're looking forward to continuing that as we go into this entire year.
Great, thank you. A student wrote in and said, my classes are online for the fall, so I won't be returning to San Jose. Can I be accommodated in housing if my classes are in person for the spring?
Yeah, what I'll say, it's a really good question, and that student's probably not the only one that has that question. What I will say is that typically there is some decline in the number of students living in housing for the spring semester. That's sort of a natural thing that happens each year. But again, we're at this point having very high numbers. So what I would say to the student is make sure that they apply as soon as possible when there's the opportunity to do so. Them being able to come into housing in the spring semester will be dependent upon availability. It is likely that we will have some availability, but it will be, we anticipate that it's going to be a less availability than we've had in previous years. So we want the students to come back and live in housing. So we hope that we will be able to accommodate that student, but it will be based upon what we have available.
Great. Now, a student wrote in to ask for information on changes to residence hall life in the fall for new and returning students. But rather than answer that question here, Patrick, I understand that you and our provost will be hosting a town hall for students and families. I assume that is the better place to address these questions. Is there another place where students can obtain information about changes to residence hall life?
Sure. Well, housing is going to be sending out to students who have applied and secured their spot in housing. Housing will be communicating with them directly. We will be talking about this in upcoming town halls. We will be messaging this out to students. What I would say generally, without going deep into it, is that our residence halls will be a controlled environment. It will not be open in the way that it has in previous years, but we will have a large number of students living there. We will still still have a no guest policy, and we will require vaccination for living in the residence halls. So there will be some restrictions. We will spell those out pretty specifically. Some students already are aware of those, but we think we will have a vibrant community that's returning to the campus.
Great, great. What types of student activities will be permitted to occur in person in the fall?
Yes. So we think a large portion of our student activities will be returning to the campus, and I'm using that term broadly. We will have speakers. Student organizations will continue to be able to operate. We will find ways to safely enable our intramural and club sports organizations to be able to operate. We've mentioned SRAC, which that team has been working on a plan, sort of a sliding scale, to be able to open SRAC in whatever ways that they can. Our wellness center will be open. We anticipate the Paseo will be back and available for students who are choosing to table. I think what I would say is, while we will go back to normal in lots of ways, what we'll be looking at is some specifics within that normalcy. So in other words, we'll be maybe a little bit more specific on the distancing between tables, making sure that we don't have the congregating and the things like that, but trying to be thoughtful, encouraging students to have their meetings, some of which should be outside. Maybe some of their events might be outside. So we'll be having those conversations with our registered, recognized student organizations, and continuing to have the discussion so that we can have a vibrant campus life. But we anticipate that we will be heading back to what has been San Jose State.
That's great. I know that students are really craving more detailed information about how they resume in-person events, groups, clubs that have struggled to operate remotely, like dance teams. When do you anticipate being able to provide students with some of that guidance, and in what form should they look for that information?
Right. So we'll communicate with our recognized student organizations directly, coming out of the Office of Student Involvement. We will share some general information with those groups, as well as other students, about reservations, and reservations not just for students, but for other folks. I anticipate that will happen shortly after the beginning of July. And so that people can begin to plan and sort of lock in their events. And we will continue to be communicating throughout between now and the beginning of the fall with recognized student organizations, and of course, any student group that is wanting to have an event, has specific questions, they should reach out to the Office of Student Involvement. Somebody could put that in the chat so that people can be reminded. We'll be happy to provide assistance. We'll get them connected to the folks inside of the student union. If they need event planning support, we'll do all the things that they need to do so that they can have their events, and making sure that they're safe and that we can really have a successful fall.
Great. And I think the answer to this question is that the guidelines are still emerging, but I'd like to ask this question anyway. Will live events and gatherings of people be allowed come fall semester? And will there be COVID specific protocols still in place?
It's a great question. And some of these are still developing. In fact, we'll be talking about them at the beginning of next week. So I anticipate that we will have live events. And I anticipate that they will have some COVID protocols. I doubt we will have large scale live events. And to the extent that we do, they will certainly have appropriate protocols attached to them. So we will have some of those, but there may be others that we don't have. And some of them will come with some guidelines around how we can have those as safely as we can. But I think students are going to have lots of opportunities to have the kinds of events, the kinds of meetings, the kinds of student organization gatherings that they want to have. I think they're going to be able to do that this fall and be able to do that in ways that are safe. And we want to help them be able to come back to campus.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. At this time, I'd like to invite Mohammed Abu Salam, our Vice President for Research and Innovation, to answer the next set of questions. Welcome. Mohammed, how is the RISCA Adapt plan changing on July 1st, specifically with respect to room capacity?
Thank you, Lisa. I want to acknowledge that the summer is indeed a key for RISCA progress, and we want to support our faculty to allow for more activity to the extent possible. So phase 4 of the RISCA Adapt plan, which will become effective on July 1st and will apply to all on-campus and field RISCA. And I invite everyone to check out the website for the details of the plan. But as a quick summary, physical distancing will no longer be required in RISCA spaces, field research, and vehicles or boats. We can operate at 100% capacity with masks being required for unvaccinated individuals. Keep in mind, though, that field research conducted at other institutions may be subject to other restrictions mandated by the host institution. Also in phase 4, on-campus participation of RISCA volunteers and human research subjects will no longer be restricted. And sanitization protocols will continue to be required for the shared equipment and spaces for everyone's safety.
Good, very good, thank you. The next question, with the move to phase 4, does this mean that our RISCA projects can resume normally, or do we still need project approval?
So in phase 4, the VPRI and DEAN approval, as well as the EHNS review of new or revised RISCA project plans are no longer required. So RISCA leaders do not need to submit RISCA project plans or EHNS checklists for approval. Also, the VPRI approval of RISCA travel is no longer required. Having said that, we are asking RISCA leaders to continue to do a few very important things. You must maintain at all times current project personnel lists and work schedules for all on-campus and field RISCA, including the names and schedules of on-campus volunteers and human research subjects. These name lists and schedules must also be registered with your college through your respective college-defined process. You also must keep on file at all times current acknowledgement forms from all project personnel, volunteers, and human research subjects. And also, depending on the nature of the work, you must obtain the necessary IRB or IACUC approvals prior to starting or modifying your work. And for research labs, you need to submit the biological use authorization documents as required by IBC guidelines. And the last thing I'd like to emphasize is that in phase 4, all active RISCA projects should continue to be more prepared for immediate shutdown and reverting to phase 1 or moving to an intermediate phase with masks and reduced density if the circumstances change at any point.
Great, thank you. And I see that we've placed the SJSU RISCA Adapt plan in the chat for anyone who needs to access that information. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to bring back Joanne Wright to answer a couple of questions that have come in since the town hall began. Joanne, a question for you. Is it just the faculty and students who are transitioning and staff who are going to be made to come back to campus full time? And can you clarify if we will be utilizing our fall plans or asked to come back to the 5-day-a-week schedule in fall?
Oh, so the answer to the first question is no, it's not just faculty and students who are transitioning, it is everyone, right? We are in transition for the fall semester, and everybody is doing the repopulation plans we've asked them to do. And I can just speak to the fact that my team, including myself, actually, we've been spending many, many hours reviewing each and every plan. We are not seeing lots of full-time people coming back on campus. So I'm not sure, where this individual is, or what is happening there. I don't know what the position is, so I can't really speak to that, because if a position needs to be back because of the duties and requirements or other reasons that have been determined by the manager, I can't specifically speak to this individuals. But I could just say that by reviewing numerous plans line by line, I'm not seeing that a lot of people be required to come back 5 days a week. There's many hybrid schedules out there. So just wanted to state that.
Okay. And I think you were actually starting to speak to this question, although it's not the one I asked on the Zoom call. Only a few. This person says only a select few people, including myself, are required to come in, while other people are allowed to stay home and work remotely. How is this fair?
Again, so as we review all the plans, and we're doing it very carefully and very diligently and meticulously, we are asking if we see something that we aren't quite sure is clear to us, like okay, maybe why is this individual this way, this schedule, and why is it this way for somebody else? We do ask those questions. We go back and forth with the scheduling MPP to make sure that we understand what the needs are and what the schedules are being developed for. But I'm not seeing, and I think my group would probably say that too, that we're not seeing that there is a broad, there's some select people that are being required to do things that others are not. So we really aren't seeing that. But if this individual wants to reach out, to us and talk about a specific situation, that might be, something that they would want to do, because I can't really speak to an individual situation without knowing all the details.
Right. I'm going to ask another question, which has come up in a previous town hall and also in some of the training sessions that you have run for managers. What advice can you offer to our faculty and staff who may perceive that there are different expectations by department, by manager? I've heard you speak to this before pretty eloquently, and I think it helps to clear up confusion that people may be experiencing about why their expectations, for this group that are such and such, and why they might look different for another group.
Right. So, the departments are unique. Departments are unique. Colleges are unique. Units are unique. Individuals are unique. So, and jobs are unique. So we can't say that, okay, everybody in a certain classification is going to be doing this, or everybody's going to be doing this in this classification. It depends on what is needed for that particular area. It also depends on the responsibilities that the individual has and how the manager is understanding how to get the work done. So it's just not going to be a one size fits all. It just really isn't. There's just too many differences between what people are doing in different areas, right? So that's what I can say to that question.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. Okay, Joanne, I think now I'm going to go to Tracy, so you're welcome to turn your video off. Tracy, I have a couple of questions for you that I alluded to earlier. The first is about some shared spaces. So will the use of employee break rooms and shared appliances be permitted when larger groups of our faculty and staff return to campus?
So we've kind of had those a little bit off base or really reduced type of use, right? Just for storage or warming. We'll go back to a more normalized use of the shared break rooms in the manner that they've been used in the past. as we start the fall semester.
Okay. And then for staff who work in cubicles and who are adjacent to other staff in cubicles, will social distancing be required as we return to campus in the fall in larger numbers?
So physical distancing requirements are no longer required. And so therefore we won't require it. But remember, for those that are vaccinated, and those that are unvaccinated, we have different masking rules. So those that are unvaccinated and in the indoor environment will be required to wear a mask.
Great, thank you. And then one last question, and I think this might come from our community all starting to talk to each other about returning. There is this phrase out there about high-risk programs, high-risk departments. Mm-hmm. What makes a department a high-risk department? And can you maybe just speak to why those departments would be in that category and what's happening now?
Yeah, sure. So, repopulation planning, it's like this ongoing discussion that we've been having over time, and it started quite some time back, right? And so as we developed an approach for repopulating the campus, we started thinking about what programs might have a higher risk related to the potential spread of COVID, or challenges based on the type of activity where they have to have additional safety requirements beyond what is typically experienced, right? And so we also were making some of those determinations at a different time period with respect to the approval of vaccines, the availability of vaccines, and then the distribution, as well as a different time period based on what the positivity rates are in the community. So when we did those assessments early on, we named a number of programs that we thought would be high risk and that we needed to have something other than our standard repopulation plan from, because we needed to understand a bit more about how they could conduct their operations safely. An excellent example is athletics, based on all the different things that they do. But as we've moved forward and as we've moved through this time period and gotten to a place where California has a reopening plan and our risk levels are down and our vaccination levels keep rising, we are now reassessing which programs really continue to be of high risk. And I'm getting communications out to folks with those updates this week.
Very good. Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you've done. At this time, I'd like to invite President Papazian to join me and then to conclude our town hall. President Papazian, there are two questions that have come up for you specifically that I will leave you with as you wrap us up. The first one is, how can we use the crisis of the pandemic to make things better? And then what can you tell us about spring 2022? And I will leave the floor to you here.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And before I respond to both of those questions, let me just thank all of you for joining us today on the webinar, because it's really important that we come together as a campus community to really talk through some of the issues, to share with you the approach that we're taking, to hear your questions, because they really inform us as we start to think about the next steps going forward, because it helps us understand what is on people's minds and what they're most concerned about and what some of their ideas are, as one of these two questions suggests, on improving things for our campus and for our community. And I also want to just take this moment to thank all of our essential workers who have been on campus all through this pandemic, many of them every day, ensuring that the operation continued, even though many were remote. Those were on campus to make sure that you could access your technology systems and whatever else you needed. And so just hats off to our essential workers who were really extraordinary through this period. So let me speak to the question at hand here. In terms of updates to spring 2022, I can't really answer that for you. And there's a little bit of a frustration here today, I'm sure, for many of you, because first, on the one hand, you're hearing some answers that are rather specific to your questions. And in far many more, you're hearing, we're not sure yet, we're waiting for news, the ground is shifting under us. And it continues to be an evolving situation. Certainly, we recognize that there will be many of you who will be needing to make plans for the spring 2022 semester. So I would say this, that once we come back for the fall and we've resolved some of the issues for the fall and we begin to look in terms of the spring, we will try to make sure that information is out to you as quickly as we can. And certainly in time for students to sign up for classes for the spring, to make decisions about whether they need to be here in San Jose or if they'll continue to take their classes online in some capacity, and many other issues that could be at play. So the best advice I can give you for that and for some of these other outstanding questions is to continue to look at the Health Adapt website, the Health Advisory's website, which is where we'll continue to put updated information, and continue to pay attention to some of the messages we send out. We'll do that periodically as more and more of the questions take on some more clear form for us. And now in terms of how we can use the crisis of the pandemic to make things better, first, I just want to acknowledge the crisis and the suffering that many have endured through this, whether it was health issues, loss, economic displacement, and the like. And so, our hearts first go out to ensuring the well-being and the safety of our campus community. But the truth is, we will come back in a way that looks very different from where we were before the pandemic. And I would start by saying, I'm sure there are many really great ideas out in our community from all sectors, from our students, from our staff, and from our faculty. And we will find ways to capture some of your really good ideas because we would love to, I think, build on your experiences, having lived things day to day, seeing what might have worked differently than you thought or than you expected. We're finding, just anecdotally, for example, that for many of our events, we have had more engagement rather than less because they've been online. So what will be the question between what needs to be in person, what might be in an online format, where we might actually take advantage of hybridity and do some in person and some online? Yeah, that also has to do with the learning environment. And I've heard from some students that they actually really prefer the online environment. I've heard from just as many others that they really can't wait to be back in person because it's better for them. I think we're going to want to listen to our students a bit on that, hear what they have to say, and work with our faculty as well. I've heard from some faculty who said they were surprised at some of the tools and how well they work to engage students. And even though they want to be fully in person, they're also going to think about ways to build in some of those tools. So I think there's a lot that we can learn. And part of the reason we're really excited about having as many people back in the fall as possible is so that we can actually share some of this, capture some of it while it's fresh, and really bring it into a campus-wide conversation about what the future really should look like. What will that future of work be? What will that future of learning be? How will we evolve as a campus in a new environment? And I think many of those questions are still out there. And so as you have ideas, write them down and let's figure out a way to reach out to you. We'll put maybe a comment section on the Health Advisory's website or something where people can drop in some of their ideas. And we'll share that with you once we fully shape it. And so with that, again, let me just close by saying thank you so much for joining us. Much more to come as the summer unfolds. Please continue to ask your questions, to work with each other and with the staff to find a path forward. And we will continue to do what we do best at San Jose State, which is to be resilient, to evolve with circumstances, to focus on our students. And at the end of the day, it's about creating a healthy, dynamic, thriving, equitable environment where students can learn, where faculty and staff can feel valued. So with that, I send you off on the rest of your day and look forward to seeing many of you on campus when we return.
we are clear.